Welcome everybody to this session with Jeff and Alyssa. Jeff and Alyssa are members of the Fertrell nutritional team. Jeff has been working with poultry from backyard to commercial scale for 25 years, so that's a lot of experience. Alyssa joined the Fertrell team 3 years ago after completing her master's degree in animal nutrition. Their focus on nutrition has always been in line with organic and sustainable farming practices, and they are happy to help us answer your questions tonight. I want to get to your questions as soon as possible, but I'll give you just a little bit of background. For those who don't know Fertrell, they are located in Pennsylvania, and the company started in 1946, so they've been around for a while. They started with natural fertilizers first and then expanded to natural animal mineral mixes in 1974, so that's as old as I am. The poultry nutri-balancer, or the P&B, most commonly known as the P&B, was introduced in 1996. P&B is one of the most well-known of Fertrell's mineral mixes due to its high quality and also to one of its most faithful ambassador, which is Joel Salatin at Polyphase Farms. You probably have heard of him, but if you haven't, just Google him. You won't be disappointed. I really enjoy his down-to-earth approach to farming and life in general, really. So Tiga Acres is, at Tiga Acres, we retail and wholesale the Fertrell product here that are available in Canada. So if you are in Canada and you're interested to hear more, you can contact us at tigaacres.com. I'm going to put the our website there, so if you want to make a note of it, it's right there. We have planned on this meeting to be an hour, but if it goes a little longer, that's okay. We want to give everybody a fair chance to get a question. So pick your most important question, one or two of them, and then we'll come back to people after that if there are more. If we don't cover all your questions, you can email them to me at tigaacres@outlook.com, and we'll do everything we can to help you. If you please let us know where you're from when you answer the question, if you're from Canada or the US, because that would make a difference in how we are able to help you. Some products produced by Fertrell are not available in Canada. And then before we start, I want to share with you some resources that you can use to get some information. So I'm going to go here and share that with you and start with this one. I'm not sure what is in there. This is the Fertrell website. Are you seeing it all right? Can somebody tell me if you actually see the Fertrell.com website on your page? On the site there? It doesn't look like it. So the address of that website is Fertrell.com. Specifically on that website, I'm not quite sure exactly what you can see because things are distorted on my screen, but if you go down to their site, you will see there is something that's called Notes and Quotes. It's a publication that they have regularly. It has a lot of very good information. I learn a lot reading it. And then there is another one, if you scroll a little bit down, it's called View Our Blog, and that's the Fertrell blog. That has a lot of information as well that I encourage you to go to. And then another resource is Fertrell's YouTube page, their channel, where you'll find the videos. One is Do I Need Medicated Feed? The other one is that was done by Alyssa, is Receiving Chicks, and then Moving Your Broilers Field. The other one is Golden Rules for Raising Poultry. All those videos have very, very valuable information, and I really encourage you to go there if you have If you have questions, you'll learn a lot. And then the fourth resource is Jeff's book. He wrote a book that's called Pasture Poultry Feeding and Management. It is available on our site. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, the one book that you should have if you're raising chickens, because it answers so many questions. It's very down to earth, very practical, and it covers a lot. So those are resources that you can have available that will answer a lot of your questions. So with this, I just want to make sure, yeah, Jeff is still there, so that's good. With that, I would like to take the first question of somebody who is actually attending. So if somebody wants to type one in, that would be great, and we'll start with it. And maybe while you do that, I'm going to pick one of Rebecca's questions and put them on. The first one was, is a soy-free poultry diet better?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I think there are two different ways to look at the answer to that question. So is the soy-free poultry diet better for the chicken or for the end product? Formulating soy-free diets can be a little bit on the trickier side, because soy is such a good protein source in that once it's been heat treated, you can use it at unlimited levels. And also it's got a really good amino acid profile, which is going to help meet all of the protein requirements for your poultry, whether they're laying eggs or you're raising them for meat. So to replace soy in a diet, we usually need 4 to 5 different protein sources, and that's because all of the soy alternatives have limiting factor. Basically, there's only so much of each of the soy alternatives that we can include in a diet. For example, peas is a good protein source, but we can only add so much peas to the diet because over 20%, 20 to 25%, there are tannins in peas, and that can affect the protein absorption. So there are issues with each of the soy alternatives, and being able to source all of that is a little bit different. Soy-free diets can perform just as well as a soy diet most of the time. Sometimes you have a little bit less performance, but if you're able to source all those different ingredients, yes, they can work well for your chicken. But in terms of, are the end products healthier, I think, Jeff, you might have a little bit more information on that than I do. I know that there was a study done, but I'm not as familiar with it as you are.
Yeah, the only real significant difference as far as the value of the chicken is you have a closer omega-3, omega-6 ratio. So in a pasture-raised soy-fed bird, we're looking at about a 6 or an 8 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3. In a soy-free bird, we can get that down to 3 to 1. Problem is nobody really knows what the right ratio of a chicken would actually be, if we weren't feeding it every day. Anything below, our government down here says, 11 to 1 or less is good for a human diet. So either the pasture raised on soy or the soy free are going to help you get under that 11 omega-6 to 1 omega-3 ratio. And it's really a personal preference. Some people have sensitivities to soy. Some people just have moral objections to how it's raised and what's going on with things, and GMOs. I wouldn't say it's better, but it is better for some people. So it's really a personal decision.
All right. So now we have a question from Beverly, which I will put up. So I'll read it. Could we discuss some of the signs and symptoms of nutritional deficiencies? And is this a possible cause of wry neck?
So the most common deficiencies that we're going to see nutritionally are, most people will see the either the riboflavin, which is what we call curly toe, and that'll happen somewhere around day 7 to day 10 of age. It's not going to happen after that. It's, you know, it's in that developmental stage that the riboflavin is that critical. And, you know, maybe day 7 to day 14. It's not going to go outside of that window very often. At the same time, you're going to start seeing, like if we're short on manganese, that's when you get the spraddle leg, and it looks like somebody just broke the chicken's leg and make it stick straight out to the side. I mean, literally straight out to the side. And the tendon slips out of the hock joint, and, you know, and you can't fix it. I mean, once it's slipped, it's slipped. It's going to be that way. And the bird will just hobble around. Wry neck, my understanding of wry neck is there's a link to thiamine deficiency, not enough thiamine. And I've had some success treating it with elevated levels of vitamin E. And I don't know the association between E and thiamine, but my understanding of wry neck, if it is a nutritional deficiency, it goes more towards thiamine, is what I've learned over the years. So, you know, you can buy these things at any local grocery store, drugstore, pharmacy, whatever you call them, and just very, very, very small amounts. So you could get a form, whether it's dry or capsulated, and one capsule for a human, you know, at 200 or 500 milligrams is enough to treat 100 chickens, 100 baby chicks. I mean, it's that, you know, it's enough to treat 100 baby chicks for 3 days. So there are simple fixes to it. I mean, that's an option, but chances are that the B vitamins are not in. They're either not in or they've worn out in the feed that you're getting, that's leading to the wry neck.
All right. So then I'm going to move to Audrey's question here, which is, I would like to design a milled grain-based feed. Once it's complete, where can I send it to have it tested to make sure it's complete nutrition-wise?
I'm not sure of what lab you have available in Canada, Ingrid. You know, we can research it and find it.
Yeah.
You know, we send ours to Waypoint Analytical in Leola, Pennsylvania, and that's a good first step. It's about a $40 test. That'll give you protein, calcium, phosphorus, and energy. But for like a really a really broad spectrum analysis, in the States, most people send it to New Jersey Feed Lab, and you can find them at njfl.com, and they outline all of the samples that they have available. To ship it across the border, it's going to take time. So if I was sending a sample, I would get it as fresh as possible, and I would vacuum seal it and try and send it as priority mail as you can. Our mail service is really lagging down here. What used to take 2 days is now taking 10. So you may want to hold off till things kind of get back to normal or something like normal. But New Jersey Feed Lab's probably your best bet, unless we can find one in Canada. And I can ask some friends, you know, for a recommendation. We can circle back around and follow up on that.
Okay, that sounds good. Beverly and Audrey, can you give me a thumbs up or something to tell me that the answer to your question is complete? Or do you have any follow-up question if we didn't cover everything? Okay, Audrey is happy. That's good. Then while we wait, I'm going to move to Rebecca's question, which I'll put here on. Is fermenting poultry feed really all it's cracked up to be, or at least soaking overnight recommended?
Um, Boy, I tell you what, the jury's out on this. It's really not. In the 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s, people soaked their feed a lot and fed it that way. And it would soften the grain. It would basically pre-soften the grain, which is what occurs in a chicken's crop. So when it first eats the grains, it then drinks water, and you're doing basically the same thing in the crop. Um, there's no benefit to it. If you got the time and you enjoy doing it, that's fine. The chickens do eat it much more aggressively, and they clean up everything better. And I actually like what they call tempering, which is a 3-day soak. And for smaller flocks, you can do this. So every day you're starting a new soak with the right amount of feed to feed your chickens for that day. And each day you're draining off the water and changing it, and you're doing a 3-day soak. But you need to keep it in a controlled environment, and you need to keep it covered with something like cheesecloth. So if we get a foreign bacteria in there that's floating around in the air, we can have a bad fermentation, or we can have a bad bacteria growth, and it can be just as devastating as it could be beneficial. So there's a little bit of a gamble in the whole fermenting thing. People are going crazy about fermenting everything now, from their own food to their animal feeds. And our field trial on soaking feed showed absolutely no difference in feed intake or carcass weight gain on broilers. And we're happy to share that with you, so we can forward that along. We have a young couple who farmed the land at Fertrell, and that was one of the trials that they did, was wetting the feed, and soaking the feed before feeding it. They saw no benefit whatsoever. And, but the birds do eat the feed much more aggressively.
All right. So if you want to give me a thumbs up, if you're able, Rebecca, I'm going to move to, and if somebody else wants to post a question, that would be great. I will move to the next one that I had prepared while we wait for those. Should protein be increased during a chicken molting period?
During the actual molt, no. They should come off their layer feed. I like people to actually have somewhat of a control on the molt. So, once you start to get below 40% production, it's time to more than likely molt your chicken. Now, not always. If you're not supplementing light and doing all the other management stuff right, they could be declining just for that reason. But, pick a time, stockpile your eggs, and plan to do the molt. And it doesn't have to be cruel and inhumane. It's just simply taking a lot of their protein away and reducing lights to below 10 hours and putting them on about a 12 to 13% high protein feed, and stay on that with a controlled amount through the molt. And about 45 days in, you put them right back on layer feed. 2 weeks after that, you start to increase the lights again to bring them back into production. Now, the key behind a molt is weigh your birds before you start the molt, and you want to lose 15 to 20% body weight on a chicken. That's getting rid of the internal fat inside that chicken's body that leads to nasty things like fatty liver. And if there's fat laying in around the ovaries, she's not going to produce as many eggs on the second lay cycle. Probably the number one thing that kills people's pet chickens, or their chickens in general, is they kill them with kindness because they feed too much energies and starches and carbohydrates. Okay, so they should be getting a somewhat controlled diet, and if it's a little bit colder, give them a little bit of cracked corn, but not every day. Don't make it a habit. Just because they like it doesn't mean it's good for them. I like ice cream, but if I have too much, it's probably not a good thing. So you got to think of it that way.
All right. So we'll move to the next question, which is Audrey's question. So she is in actually Alberta. I'll put it up here. Is it necessary to wash the grains before adding it to a feed mix?
Like wash it with water? If that's what you mean, I don't believe so, no.
No, there's no need to. If the grains are good and clean and there's no mycotoxins or any dusty, I mean, if they're not severely dusty or odd smelling, and even then I wouldn't feed them, but there's no need to pre-wash grains prior to putting them into a feed mix.
All right. So since you just touched on mycotoxins, let me put this one up. What are mycotoxins? And are they dangerous for animals? What can I do to prevent or alleviate the effects?
Alyssa's really good at this, so I'm going to let her answer this one.
So mycotoxins are essentially the byproduct of fungus. So when a plant is in the field, if it's under any kind of stress, whether it's drought, too much rain, when they're harvesting, if the grain gets damaged, what can be left over is mycotoxins. And there are 5 different classes of mycotoxins, but we talk about donbomatoxin the most because it's the most prevalent, basically. And if you have donbomatoxin in your grains, then you're likely to have other toxins as well. So they can be dangerous for animals. The biggest thing you're going to notice if you have mycotoxins is they're probably not going to eat the feed as well. If you've got a complete feed and they're starting to kick out like whole pieces of corn, that could definitely suggest that there are mycotoxins. You can get it tested for mycotoxins, or you can get your feed tested for mycotoxins if you believe you're having an issue with it. You can also add a toxin binder to your feed, such as Redmond conditioner. Redmond conditioner is available in Canada, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, that could definitely help too.
We have zeolite as well. I've heard that can help. Zeolite.
Yeah, the zeolite would work equally as well as the Redmond conditioner.
Right,
Yeah.
yep. So both of those can help alleviate the effects of mycotoxins.
All right, and now I have a question from Audrey. Let me show it here. What is the optimum protein percentage for a layer mix? Can roosters eat a layer mix if the roosters are running with the hens?
So your average layer mix is going to be a 17%, 16 to 17%. I think that both of those would work well for like a standard layer feed.
And the rooster, so for the first year, the rooster can eat the layer feed. It's not going to hurt him. If you're going to keep a rooster for breeding purposes long term, the excess calcium in the layer feed is going to eventually build up in the kidneys and interrupt with the processing of protein. Can lead to things like gout. I just ran into this the other day. When you get that a rooster that steps really high and it seems like he's got a leg issue, it turns out to be gout, and it's coming from eating the same feed. So for breeders who are going to keep a rooster for 3, 4, 5 years, then feeding him the layer feed all the time is going to run into a long-term issue. So, and to go along with Alyssa's comment, on average, right, 16, 17%. You didn't say exactly what breed. That changes things a little bit, and also time of year. In Canada in the winter, you probably can get by with a 14 or 15% protein because they're eating more energy to stay warm. And in the middle of the summer, when it gets pretty hot, you could run up to a 19%. So it's nice if you have the ability to fluctuate based on the weather. But all in all, if you're looking for one mix, Alyssa is right at 17%.
All right. I'm going to move to the next question, which was from Rebecca. When do you deworm chickens? Do you do an annual chemical prevention no matter what, or just treat as needed? And do natural methods work, like pumpkin seeds, herbal combinations, garlic, and wormwood?
So when do you deworm chickens is a good question. I think that, my opinion, that people deworm a little bit more often than they need to, and that's part of the issues that we've been seeing a lot of resistance to the normal the chemical dewormers that are on the market. So I don't think you should deworm your chickens unless you think you have an issue. And if you're feeding grit, I think that that is also going to be a natural way to a good prevention. So grit is going to, there are a lot of benefits to grit. It's going to help with your feed digestion, and also it's going to help break down any kind of those internal parasites that they could be picking up from the ground. And in terms of natural methods like pumpkin seeds, I don't have any direct experience with that, but I believe pumpkin seeds are pretty high in tannins, and tannins are really beneficial for deworming. Jeff might have a little more information on that.
The natural methods actually do work, but let's back up. I mean, Alyssa really hit it. If you're feeding the right size grit, as it passes through the digestive tract, it's going to dislodge most of those roundworms and internal parasites. So in 25 years of doing this, I think I might have had 2 cases where we knew for sure that they were internal parasites and the person was still feeding grit. And I'd have to tell you that the living conditions that those chickens were in were horrible. I mean, it was mostly a mud lot. There was nothing green. There was nothing good, and the bedding was horrible. So really, if you keep the right size grit in front of them, good hard granite grit, I don't think you're gonna have to ever worm your chickens. The other thing that works is keeping a low level of dense fiber. I like oats, and the oat hull after it's ground passing through is also a natural internal parasite deterrent. Now look, wormwood, herbal combinations, garlic, they all work to a certain degree, but none of them work perfectly. You're still not going to get a complete clean out. When somebody shows me that they have worms, they see them in the manure, and if you've got worms, you're going to see it. You'll see the roundworms in the manure. You catch some fresh, a fresh plop, and you can spread it out with a putty knife. You can see them with the naked eye. They're pretty easy to detect. I actually like to run either copper in the feed, or I'll actually do copper sulfate in the water. 1 tablespoon of copper sulfate per 5 gallons of drinking water for 3 to 5 days. And we've been using copper for years to control insects and manage parasite loading. So it's not new. It's pretty simple. It's not a drug. There's no withholding. There's nothing that's going to pass through in the egg or the meat that's going to be harmful to anybody. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But don't just do it because you think you need to do it. I'm watching some of these Facebook pages with pastured poultry and backyard poultry, and these people are just crazy about worming their chickens, and I'm like, ugh, don't do that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, does that answer your question, Rebecca? If you can give me a thumbs up if you're able, and while you do that, I'm going to move to the next question. Oh, there you go. I have one from Dan Brulé. Hi, Dan. When using Grazier Freedom Ranger, since they need to be raised longer than the Cornish cross, they get more mature and seem to fight more. Is it a good idea to separate hens from the roosters to greatly reduce fighting? Does it result in better carcass again if they are less stressed?
Most of the people I know doing the Freedom Rangers, actually, they tend to do sexed birds. So I find people that are either getting all cockerels or all hens. You don't tend to see the fighting until about 12 weeks old, and they start coming into maturity. So they weren't really designed to go that long. I mean, they can, but they're designed to be a 9 or a 10 week bird when they're processed for that 4 to 5 pound carcass weight. So it's you could try doing sexed. I don't know if separating the cockerels is going to solve the problem. I've seen people doing straight cockerels, and when they turn into teenage boys, they're just going to fight anyway. No matter what we do, it's just the nature of the beast. And you can try it, but I don't know that you're going to have the satisfaction, you know. And I don't know that you're going to see any better carcass gain. I'd be interested if you do a batch and you separate the cockerels, if you see much of a difference. But when you separate them, they actually have to be out of sight and out of hearing range of those hens. What they're fighting over is the attention of the hens. So when you do that separation, it's going to have to be far apart. I mean, a big gap, you know, because as long as they can see the hens and hear the hens, they're going to continue to fight.
All right.
Ingrid, we missed one on Beverly. You skipped over.
Yeah, I actually was trying to click on hers, and then Dan's came in. So as I clicked, I got his, but I've got her here. We use natural scent as grit. Is that adequate?
It's fine for baby chicks, but adult birds, it's not going to be big enough. Like an adult bird layer is looking for a rough edge stone that's about oh boy, sorry, I'm going to use U.S. standard measurements, 1/4 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch. So you're probably looking at, you know, 3, 4, 5 millimeters by, you know, 8 millimeters is what they're going to be looking for. That's the appropriate size. It needs to be equal to the size of a field pea or a full kernel of corn, you know, because if it's too small, it's not going to stay in there long enough to be effective, right? And you do want either quartzite or granite, because it'll stay in the gizzard longer and you get more value out of it. And you want stones with rough edges.
I hope that you can see it. I'm going to put it here. If you go to, I'm going to create it here and put it up. If you go to our website, right there at this link, Granny Grit Fertrell Canada at Tiga Acres, if you go to that page, there is a picture of all the grits, their sizes, and what they're good for. And there is a little ruler there that shows you the size that you need per age.
So they didn't catch the copper sulfate that I talked about. It's one. So for us, it's 1 tablespoon, like you'd use in a kitchen for measuring, approximately 1 ounce per 5 gallons of drinking water. Again, sorry, I'm using U.S. standard measurement. I don't know how many liters that would be off the top of my head. So
a gallon. We work with gallon too, but I think you have a different gallon that we do. I think you use the Imperial and we use the other one.
Yeah, it would be 800 to 1 ratio. How's that? And that's looking at ounces. So for every 800 ounces, I'd be looking, or every 600 ounces, I'm sorry, I would be looking for 1 ounce, 600 to 1 ratio.
Okay, so now so that was Audrey's question. I'm going to move to this one. From Cat and Crow Farm. I've been fermenting feed for my 110 chickens. Mixed ages, youngest is 2.5 months, oldest is 5 months. I've been measuring out 1/4 pound of feed per chicken and they go through it super fast.
It has to be 1/4 pound before the water's added. And in the wintertime, they're going to eat more because they have a higher energy need. So the quarter pound is before adding the moisture to it. So that would be the dry weight of the feed.
And there is another comment. How do I know if I'm feeding them enough? They have pasture to eat as well. And they are eating about 25 pounds per day.
110 birds, actually, if I take it times 0.25, should be just over 25 pounds. I don't know what area is Cat and Crow in. Did they say earlier where they're from?
I don't think they did. Can you?
Okay. So temperature is going to play into that, and you can't just lock in hard on quarter pound a day. Quarter pound is based on temperatures between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it gets hotter, they're going to eat less, and when it's colder, they're going to eat more.
It's British Columbia, Jeff.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're sex links or not, but or what the weight of the bird is, but they're probably going to want to eat closer to 6 ounces. So what I do there, is I go with the 4 ounces of layer feed, and then you supplement with either some whole wheat or some cracked corn to make up the additional 2 ounces, which is just going to be energy, right, in the wintertime. So they're probably looking for closer to 6 ounces of feed during the colder months.
Okay, good to know. I have 50 sex-linked browns.
Okay, so there would be a 4-pound bird. Again, the 4 ounces of prepared feed should be enough to get a good egg, and then they're going to have to adjust based on temperatures. So as the temperatures drop, if you're doing a 50% non-GMO layer and 50% wheat, you're probably way behind them on energy and protein. So unless you have another protein source. Grower. Okay. Grower would be 18 and wheat is going to be 14. So you're going to end up right at that 16% mark. That's not too bad, but I still think energy wise, you're going to need close to 6 ounces of that mix.
Okay, so I can move on to the next question from Rebecca. Feeding sulfur to chicken, supplement in the winter in feed, or is adding it to the soil enough to cover them during good weather if they aren't out free ranging with snow on the ground?
Alyssa, you want it or you want me to take it?
Well, I'll answer what I think she's asking, and if it's not right, then I'll let you finish it. So if you're feeding sulfur to chickens, I'm guessing that's for controlling mites and lice in the winter. Then I would add it to feed, especially because it's really variable what they're going to be getting from the pasture in the winter. Otherwise, if you're using the poultry NutriBalancer, you're going to meet their standard sulfur body requirements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Rebecca, type in what you're asking about the sulfur for, because if you want to control external parasites, we add it to the feed at 4 to 5 pounds per ton. But adding it to the soil is not going to give you a whole lot of benefit as far as, parasite control, external parasite control at this time of year.
A dust bath is really good for external parasites too. Wood or coal ash.
This was, hang on here. I think this was her original question. Maybe that's what she was referring to. Is yellow recommended for licensed?
In the feed, yeah.
In the feed.
Yes.
You start at 5 pounds per ton. Again, sorry, I don't know my metrics very well. 5 pounds per ton, 2.5 kilos per ton. You start out with that, and then you can drop back down after 30 days to 3 pounds or, 1.5 kilos per per ton. And that'll manage it. That's as good as we can do. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to get rid of all of them. Like Alyssa said, if you can, a dust bath works wonderful. Particularly if you have access to wood or coal ashes, they love it. I mean, it just makes a really good dust bath for chickens. So if you're burning wood or coal, it's a good way to get a second use out of it with the ashes.
All right. And then I have a question from Beverly. What is the key difference between feeding whole grains, rolled grains, or ground grains for laying hens?
I would say the biggest difference is going to be your particle size. So if you're going to be feeding whole grains, I would definitely make sure that you have grit offered to them, and it needs to be the right size grit. So the reason that grit's so important for poultry is that chickens don't have teeth, right? So the grit goes down into the gizzard with the feed and works with the gizzard to help grind the feed down. So grit's super important if you're going to be feeding whole grains. Rolled grains are going to be, I don't know the exact size of them, but they're going to be a little bit larger particle size, and then ground grains is going to be finer. You still need grit with all of those, in my opinion, but that's the key difference. Jeff might have more to add.
Yeah, nutritionally speaking, there's not a big difference. But if you're going to feed whole grains or rolled grains, you got to have grit. I mean, and you got to have big grit. And it's going to take longer to break down. I find that the heritage breeds do better on the whole grains versus, the more modern breeds. They don't quite do as well. So I don't really have a strong preference. There's a lot of people doing whole grain layer feeds out there, and the birds eat it like crazy, just like you dumping out candy. So the hard part is there's no way to deliver the calcium and the vitamins and the minerals and a lot of the small stuff because it won't stick to the grain, and the birds are not likely. It's going to be the powder left in the bottom of the feeder, and then the chicken owner gets grumpy. What am I supposed to do with all this powder? And so it creates a whole other problem. But the chicken loves the whole grains way better than it does, particularly a fine ground grain. So you're going to have to figure out a way to get the minerals into them, the essential minerals into those birds, because it's just going to fall right to the bottom. So.
All right, and I have a follow-up comment from Rebecca. P&B has sufficient amount already in it. That was about the sulfur.
Yeah, to meet their basic nutritional requirements, not to help prevent mites and lice.
Okay. A large sand area and a covered run with ashes in it.
Yeah, just keep putting the ashes in there. But when I had my hens in the backyard, I used what they called a mortar mixing tub. It's about 16 by 24 black plastic tub found at a local hardware store. And I would keep that full, and they just loved it. And when you put fresh ashes out, they'd run up and eat a bunch of it, and then they jump in. It's comical because they'll bury themselves right to their eyelids, and they just love it. It's like a day at the spa for a chicken. I mean, it's the most hilarious thing you'll ever see in your life. And you can also use like a plastic barrel cut in half, and then fill that about halfway full. But once they figure out what the ashes are, they just, and it can go year round. There's no.
So you have the ash, it's just straight, or do you mix it with something?
No, for mine, I just went straight ash. I didn't mix it with anything.
Could you put DE in there?
You could put some DE in there if you wanted to. I mean, you can add stuff to it, but I'm going to give you a quick funny story. I was working with an Amish fella in Wisconsin, and he had 900, Bovan Brown, sex-link type chickens, and he's Amish, so he cooks with wood. He even made maple syrup with wood. He had saved all of his ashes for a whole year, getting ready for winter. He had 12 barrels out there. And he started in November when he brought the birds in. And by the time I saw him the last week of February, he was already out of all of his ashes, which was about 2 or 3 tons worth. And he was begging ashes off of all of his neighbors up and down the road. So he'd go up and down the road with the wagon to get more ashes. And his hens just loved those ashes. So, yeah.
So one thing is, if you are going to give them a bath that's just with ashes, you have to make sure that it stays dry, right?
Yeah, you do put it under cover. You don't put it out where it's going to get rained on, because then it's going to, it's going to get all yucky and mat down. I always made sure I put it under a cover. If it did get wet, I dump it out and I start over, just put more ash back in there. But once they figure it out, it's just amazing what they'll do with ashes.
Yes.
And they will fight over it. So make sure you have enough dust baths for everybody, because it'll start a stressful situation.
Okay, we don't want a stressful situation. Okay, so there is a question here that's seconded by Cat and Crow Farm. I hear so much about DE cause respiratory issues. It's fine as long as it's food and flow around.
I don't know where these people come up with this. Look, yeah, I can't tell you how many bags of diatomaceous earth DE I have dumped into feed mixes or mineral mixes in my lifetime, right? And somebody come up with this, and it spread across the internet like wildfire, and there is absolutely not a lick of truth to that. DE being, yeah, I don't know where that comes from, but I'm going to say that's 100% BS.
All right. Well, I think there we go. Comment on that. All right. So does anybody else who is attending have a question? I'm going to put on another one. There is an interesting one. What are some of the benefits and improvement people notice when they switch to the PNB? So the PNB is the poultry NutriBalancer. It's the mineral premix that Fertrell offers, for those of you who don't know.
So I'd say one of the biggest benefits that we have with the poultry NutriBalancer is the higher vitamin levels. And with these higher vitamin levels, basically it's making sure that your animals are healthier from the inside out. And once you've got healthier animals, they'll essentially be able to fight off diseases and illnesses and perform better because they're healthier. There was a farmer down in Florida who basically had this similar question on whether or not a complete mineral using the poultry NutriBalancer is as beneficial as not using any mineral at all. So he did his own trial run. And this was on a batch of broilers. So he did 3 different groups. The first group was fed a complete feed using the poultry NutriBalancer. One was a feed using just a sea salt mineral, and then the third batch didn't have any grain or any vitamin or mineral premix added at all. So in the end, we'll talk about mortality first. So the group with the poultry NutriBalancer had a 2% mortality, whereas the group with no mineral added at all had a 15% mortality, which I think is pretty significant. And then the group that had just the trace mineral salt had a 10% mortality. So that helped with his livability. And then he also compared the carcass weights of each group. So the group that didn't have any vitamin or mineral premix added at all had an average carcass weight of 4 pounds. The group that had just the trace mineral salt or the sea salt added had a carcass weight of 4.5 pounds, while the third batch had a 5 to 6 pound carcass weight. So overall, the poultry NutriBalancer, when you're comparing it to no vitamin and mineral premix added at all versus the poultry NutriBalancer in the feed had less mortality and better weight gain in the end.
Yes, when we started using the P&B, when Jeff made a ration for us, we saw a big improvement in the health of the chickens, in the weight gain, and in flock behaviors, meaning that the birds were more settled. They didn't fight as much. There was a lot less pecking, if any pecking at all. It made just a huge difference. Took a lot of headaches out of our lives, I guess, would be the way to put it. I have another question here from Rebecca that I'm going to put up. What is the best way to add P&B to the feed so it doesn't fall to the bottom and get mixed? Wet feed or add molasses to make it stick and get consumed?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely adding some, if you wet it, that's going to help the fines, which is the poultry nutrient balancer, and your calcium, help that stick to the other grains. Adding molasses can be beneficial too, but I'd be careful with the molasses because I think it can cause diarrhea in chickens. So adding oil would be a better option to help it stick together. And fines are frustrating, I understand that, but unfortunately it is the nature of the beast if you're doing a mash feed versus a pellet.
All right, I'll move to the next question here. More with the fermented feed. We have switched to feeding them twice a day since they got through it so fast. I was worried about crop impactions and gorging. Does it matter if they finish the feed and then go to pasture, or is it better to feed twice a day? We usually feed at 9 a.m. and they are done by 3 p.m.
So actually laying hens should always get fed twice a day. Now, here's the ugly part of it is statistically, or research shows that if we can feed the hens about 10 minutes before they come off the roost in the morning, we actually see an increase in egg production. And they should get about 40%, 35-40% of their diet in the AM, and then their heaviest feeding should be as close to 1 hour before sunset as possible. So I talked about, my chickens in the backyard. We used to keep a group of 25 to 30, and I used them really as a control group for observations and things like that. Plus, we got the eggs. But I noticed in the afternoon at just about the same time every day, about 1 hour before the sun went down, all the hens were at the feeder. Like everybody was filling up, and you could see it. Their crop just got huge, like they swallowed a baseball. And then once they were done filling up, they just kind of milled around a little bit. They had the little social hour, but they all just gradually worked themselves back to the hen house and to the roost. And when the sun went down, 80% of them were up on the roost. Like sunset says it's the end of the day for a chicken. It's just the way their normal instinct works. So I would feed 35-40% in the morning, and then I would do my heavier feeding, probably 60% of what you're going to feed for the day in the afternoon. You're going to be a lot happier with that.
All right. I have another question here. With soy-free feed ration for meat birds, which protein is better, fish or insects?
There's really not a significant difference between like the black soldier fly and the fish as far as their amino acid profiles. And when you talk about protein, we're actually talking about how the amino acids line up. If it's a whole fish meal, I'm going to weigh heavier on the fish meal side. If it's byproduct fish meal where you're just getting bones, lips and tails, the insect meal is going to beat it. So probably, sorry, I'm measuring this with a micrometer, but not all fish meals are created equal, and neither are all insect meals. So, there's some really good insect meals out there, but there's some really great fish meals out there. And I think if they were mine, I would probably do a combination of fish and insect so that I don't get a potential off flavoring of the meat in the end.
All right. Let's go to the next question here. So this is from Star Campbell. Can we add the P&B to scrambled eggs and the soaked grains, which they love?
There's no reason not to. Just trying to figure out how to get 3% of their total diet as P&B into them. So it would take some math to figure that out, but I don't have a problem with doing that. So.
Okay, and then there is a follow-up. Where was it? Barry Heineman, the question, with the feeding schedule you just discussed, is it just better to have self-feeders?
Barry, you're not going to like my answer. Alyssa's a lot softer on this subject than I am, but for laying hens, self-feeders are the worst thing ever invented, because they're going to overeat. You're going to waste money on the feed side. They're going to get too fat. You're going to reduce the total number of eggs laid, and so you're losing out on the production side and you're losing out on the feed side. But self-feeders were made, to make life more convenient. So if you're not worried about the feed cost and you're not worried about how many eggs they lay, then self-feeding is perfectly fine.
Okay. Next one. Are camelina meal and hay meal acceptable protein options?
Yeah, they not as the only protein sources, but you can use camelina meal and hay meal. Is camelina meal in the U.S.? Camelina meal is restricted on how much we can use in poultry feeds.
Yeah.
Does it? I think it causes off flavoring. Does it? Also?
No, but it's limited to 10% in our diets. The USDA has us limited at 10%. I don't know what the Canadian standards are on that.
No, I don't know either.
And the hay meal is going to be limited on your total fiber in the diet. So there's only so much you can add, and then once you go over about 5 or 6% fiber in the diet, then you're going to start working against yourself.
All right. And then I have if you have a follow-up question on the questions we're answering, please let us know.
Yeah, Dan's got that one on cricket meal you just skipped over.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, cricket meal, in my opinion, is better than black soldier fly.
Why?
We have a better control on the diet of the cricket versus the black soldier fly is really eating waste stream. We have no idea if it's been exposed to salmonella or E. coli or any of those pathogens. So it's working more in a compost pile environment, whereas the cricket is not. The cricket's, living in a high dry environment, but the cricket is actually eating chicken feed. So we could probably skip the cricket and just feed the chicken feed, because the cricket's actually being fed chicken feed in most cases. But it makes it soy free to feed the cricket and not the chicken feed.
Oh, interesting.
All right, I'm only feeding them fermented feed to save money. The free choice grain is crazy expensive when you have hundreds of birds. And another one, free choice grower pellets. So these two comments go together. And
No, I still wouldn't free choice the grower pellets. If we get the energy level right, the birds won't eat you out of house and home. It won't be crazy expensive. So a chicken eats for its energy needs on a daily basis. Every day it needs this many calories to be happy. And so, being able to move with the seasons and the temperatures and things like that, you can keep a lot of that under control so it doesn't feel so expensive. And I see all the posts out there about fermenting feed, saving money, and I personally have not seen that be the case. They eat it a lot better. They digest it a little bit better. But I don't know that it's saving anybody any significant amount of money.
And this is from Star Campbell. She had the question about mixing the P&B to scrambled eggs and whatever else it was there that she was, let me go back, soaked grains. And
Yeah.
so she's excellent on a P&B on soaked grains and scrambled eggs. I was worried about the moisture causing a problem with field peas be fed ground to the birds.
Yeah, field peas do need to be at least cracked really hard. They don't have to be turned into powder. And let's go back to the scrambled egg. So I need the P&B, I need the scrambled eggs to be cooked at a very low temperature. So it's going to take longer to cook them. All right. Otherwise, you're losing a lot of the beneficial probiotics in the P&B, that the birds could benefit from. So low temperature, put them in late, as late as you can in the scrambled egg. And, so right as the last of the runniness is on the scrambled egg is going away is when you want to put the P&B in. And then I would remove it from heat and just incorporate it. So you're going to have kind of like a soft cooked scrambled egg there.
Okay, so ground field peas can be added without issues. I have barrels of it.
Yeah. As long as they're in good shape, there's nothing wrong with field peas.
Okay, and then next comment, is cricket meal enough to cover protein and amino acids as with soy and fish meal?
No. Crickets as themselves, as a wet cricket, live cricket, are only between 18 and 20% protein. When you dry them, you're going to get up to about 30, 32. I'd have to double check the numbers. But they're not as high as the black soldier fly, and fish meal is going to be 60 to 65% protein. So, yeah, the crickets aren't going to quite get there all by themselves. Crickets by themselves are actually a complete diet for a chicken, right? So they would replace your corn, your wheat, your, pretty much everything. So if you had enough cricket meal, it would be a complete chicken feed by itself.
All right. Then I have another one here. What is the best type of bedding in the coop? What can I do to have a successful deep litter system? Some tips, I guess, to make it work.
I would use different types of bedding. The best, if you want to do the successful deep litter system, so I would start out with straw on the bottom with a little bit of, some wood chips or pine shavings on top of that. Periodically, I would come in with peat moss, then I'd come back in with a little bit of chopped straw. So changing your carbon is going to help your deep bedding. Trying to stick with all one bedding style or one bedding type. I do avoid hay. For some reason, chopped hays will tend to invite skin disorders, and I tend to see more external parasites like mites and lice with chopped hay. But the best bedding is peat moss, dried peat moss if you can get it. Dried, baled peat moss is absolutely the best poultry litter you'll ever find.
When you say chopped hay, would that include, there is something that's coming on the market here. It's a hemp straw.
No, not the same. Hemp straw is fine.
Hemp straw is fine. Okay.
Now, hemp straw, depending on where it's coming from, if you get the main stem on hemp, the fiber density is extremely high. You can actually get splinters that will poke through the chicken's skin. So you just need to be careful, inspect it. Don't assume that it's good. It can be incorporated as part of the bedding. Doesn't have great absorbency, but it's not bad. It's starting to gain momentum and favorability.
That's what I've seen.
Yep.
And I have another question here from Beverly. Any thoughts on feeding charcoal?
Like feeding charcoal daily or as a preventative. So charcoal in general is going to act as just I'd call it a generic toxin buyer. So after college, I worked for this story is relevant, I promise, for a large animal that, and we worked a lot with horses, and occasionally we had some various horses that they either got into something or they just had some kind of digestive upset, and we would give a whole tube of charcoal to them, and that usually sorted out the problem. So charcoal can be good if you want to just offer it on the side, and they'll pick at it as they need it. I've heard of pigs just kind of, people have offered charcoal to the pigs on the side, and they've eaten it whenever they are having any kind of stomach issue. So I don't think charcoal is a bad thing, but I don't necessarily think you need to put it either. We worked a lot with horses, and occasionally we had some various horses that they.
All right. Do I still have sound? I can't hear anybody anymore.
Oh,
okay. Good. Good.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
I was hoping that everything was fine because our. Okay, there we go. So what should a rooster be fed? A grower feed?
Yes, that's exactly right. A nice 18% protein, low calcium, and depending on what breed of rooster, about 3 ounces a day is plenty. 2 to 3 ounces. He doesn't need a lot. And it's just, how do you feed him separately? That's the hard part. You're going to have to pull him out, feed him, and then put him back in. But
okay, let me move to this one. What is sauerkraut? What causes it? How can it be treated? And how can it be prevented?
Alyssa, you want it, or you want me to take it?
You got it.
Okay. So sauerkraut is when the crop fills up, but it doesn't empty out in a timely fashion. So the feed sits in there too long, and you start to get some type of a bacterial growth, whether it's yeast or something else. And then it's fermenting too much in that crop. And it'll actually, it can come from blockage. I usually only see sauerkraut in the early spring when we first put birds out on pasture, and they go out and they eat way too much grass all at one time, and the crop gets impacted, and it can't pass through. And then they put grain in on top of it, and then we've got a really weird fermentation going on in there. And I'm going to go back to grit, so I don't have problems with things like sauerkraut and impaction when I have grit. Now, if you already have the sauerkraut, some people have reported having some success with vinegar, but you're almost going to have to hold the chicken and kind of inject orally drench the chicken with the vinegar. And you could also do the same thing with just plain old mineral oil that you can get, mineral oil, or if you want to go get some vegetable oil out of the kitchen, something that you're cooking oil, you're going to run about 5 cc's, down the bird's throat. And then you're going to cross your fingers and hope a whole lot that it passes. So sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It's probably a 50-50 thing. But when grit's being offered, I don't know why, but I just don't see issues with sauerkraut when there's plenty of the correct size grit available to the birds. And I don't even know what the connection is. I'm just saying, my observation, I don't see sauerkraut when I have grit available.
Well, that's good to know, because that's a good preventative, because once you're faced with that, it's not easy to deal with. And here, I have some hens coming into laying age soon. The rest are a couple months away. Is there an all-round feed I can feed them if I have oyster shells and other things available until all of them are of laying age?
Yeah, just leave them on the grower feed and put the oyster shells in. And then in about a month, they can switch them all over to layer feed. But 2 months away from laying is too far to put them on a layer feed right now. So another 30 days, should be able to put them all on layer feed at the same time. For now, just do the oyster shell with the grower feed.
Okay, The next question is from Barry. Have either of you had any experiences with the product Cattle Active?
I have not heard of it. Yeah.
Maybe Barry, can you tell us a little more what it is and what it's for while I get. Okay, Rebecca, could the whole flock be on a grower with oyster shells offered free choice if there is a rooster in with the hens?
Rebecca, I would actually put the oyster shells in with the grower feed and just let the rooster peck around, and not have to eat the oyster shells. He'll be fine. He'll avoid the oyster shells. He's not going to get forced into it. So, in a mash type feed or where it's separated, where the calcium's separated, those roosters do fine. In a prepared feed where the particle size is all the same, where you have pellets and he can't really choose, then he's going to have to then he's force fed the calcium. But with what you're suggesting, you can just mix the oyster shell right in with the grower feed at the right ratio and he'll be fine.
Okay, the next one is, what is coccidiosis? How can I prevent it or treat it? Now, I know, Jeff, that you touch on that in your video that's on your Fertrell YouTube channel about medicated feed. So there is a lot of information there, but if you want to cover that quickly here with some basics.
Oh, geez. Alyssa, do you want to cover coccidiosis? Because I'm going to say it all wrong and they're going to be mad at me.
That's okay. Yeah, I can do coccidiosis really quick. I will say I agree with you, Ingrid. That video that Jeff did, he does do a really good job on explaining it. And I think it's only like 10 minutes, so take the 10 minutes and definitely watch it. But coccidiosis is basically a protozoa that overpopulates the digestive system of a chicken and can cause runny manure and runny manure and bloody manure and basically ulcerations in the digestive system or digestive tract. The best way to prevent it is through management. I would say coccidiosis is 100%. I'll go like 98% management issue. So if you can keep your bedding clean, that's definitely going to help. Making sure that they're not eating feed off of the ground, which I do understand can be difficult for chickens, but that's where making sure you've got good feeder height is going to be helpful. Going back to the bedding, Fertrell is a big supporter of using peat moss for bedding. Jeff talked a little bit about that, and the reason for that is that peat moss has a natural low pH, and that makes it difficult for bacteria and protozoa that cause issues like coccidiosis to grow. So making sure that you have good bedding management is going to help. If you already have it, the couple ways to treat it, you can offer raw milk or a dairy product, something like that. Offer it for an hour every day for, let's say, 5 to 7 days. And what the dairy product is going to do is that's going to help feed the good bacteria in the gut to help basically snuff out that bad coccidiosis bacteria that's causing your issues. If you're having really bad problems, you can use the copper sulfate in the water it was 1 ounce per 5 gallons of water. Do that for 3 days, I think. Was that 3 to 5 days? But you don't want to overdo the copper sulfate, because what copper sulfate is going to do is it kills all of the bacteria in the digestive system, good, bad, and indifferent. It wipes it all out. So I think a good option for you if you're going to do the copper sulfate is follow it with some either probiotics or direct fed microbials to help repopulate that the bacteria system in their digestive system. I think I answered all those questions. I might have said it a little quickly. If I did, sorry.
It was good. I'm saying goodbye to Cat and Crow because she has to go. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming, and thank you for your questions.
Yes, they were very interesting questions. Now, Barry is back to us with about his, what was it again? Cattle Active. It's a natural product for digestive issues in cattle, horses, and hogs. Supposedly it can be used on birds too. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
And it'd be interesting to see what the ingredients are, but I'm not sure.
I'd have to read a label to give an intelligent response. So I still not sure what's in it.
Yes. Barry, if you want to email me a label or send me a website where I can find it, I can certainly forward the question to Jeff and Alyssa. And then we have here, what about if there is enterococcus with a flock of chickens? That is what my vet thinks some of my chickens have.
Yeah, I mean, Enterococcus is one of the yeast strains that they're naturally occurring in a chicken's digestive tract. So unless, I mean, something really in the environment had to go crazy for it to be, I mean, it can be a problem, but we almost had to feed it through the environment and diet to let it get out of control. So, just I would go back to my earlier comment about, trying some copper sulfate in the water to reset the digestive tract and get the bacteria back in line. And, but I haven't run into Enterococcus more than once or twice, in 20 plus years. And it's really odd. And it almost goes back to an environmental. I'd have a whole lot of other questions like, what's the water quality? What are you feeding them? Are you feeding them anything supplemental? As treats, and try and figure out what's something's feeding the Enterococcus that's making them more prolific in the digestive tract, if that's actually what the problem is. So,
Okay, here is another comment. Okay, when we give Enterococcus fascia in probiotics, does it raise the risks?
Not to my knowledge, and there's a lot of different strains of Enterococcus. So I don't know if it's Enterococcus faecium or if it's there's also some streptococcuses out there. And so I honestly don't have a good answer for you, but I don't know. I don't see why in a probiotic, why it would raise the risk. I've never had an issue with it. Enterococcus faecium has always been beneficial in a feeding program for poultry, as far as I know, unless you're like way overdoing it and you've got a total digestive bacteria imbalance. You missed Rebecca's zeolite question, by the way.
Yeah, I did see it. I wanted to bring the other one because they were related. Should zeolite always be added to feed? Will they take it if free choice? I can answer that very quickly, and then I'll let you take it. My chickens do eat when I put it out in the morning. I put some on the bedding, and that's the first thing that I put down. They all run into the coop, and they just eat it like it's candy. It's the first grit that I actually gave them because I wasn't able to find grit, so I gave them some of that. Maybe they remember. They just love it. So they may or may not take it free choice, depends if they are used to it, but it's not impossible.
And there's no real negative side effect of putting it in the feed on an ongoing basis. Somewhere less than 1% of the diet, so, 20 pounds per ton, 25 pounds per ton, somewhere in there is not going to hurt anything. I would not go at higher levels. And you can also put out a pan or, a side dish, free choice. And if they want it, they'll take it. It has no smell or taste. So they're going to eat it if they need it. It'll take a while for them to figure it out. But
All right. So if somebody wants to put another question. I'll get something else in the meantime. Okay, here. Here is an interesting one. And that was from Rebecca. She had mailed that to me. There you go. What's in your chicken first aid kits? The must-haves.
You got to have some extra vitamin E. So I like to keep, I keep vitamin E. So anytime I see an illness, I go for vitamin E. Everybody should make their own bottle of garlic tincture or garlic oil, whichever one you want. Garlic tincture, this is so simple, and people, I give people a recipe for free, and they just don't do it. It's like, well, that's not going to work. It's too cheap. So we started bottling it and selling it and making money. One full bulb of garlic, all right, and you take the center stem out and take off the roots, but you don't have to peel it and do all that fancy stuff and then grind that, put it through a mincer or whatever, and put that in 1/5 of, any clear alcohol. I tell people to use vodka, put it in there, put a piece of tape on it, mark it with a date. You don't use it for 30 days. And I like to put it in a warmer location in the house, not hot, okay? But if there's a warmer location and not in direct sunlight. And after 30 days, it's ready to use, and you can use that for any infection. So if the birds are sick from something, you can use that at 1 ounce per gallon of drinking water, and that's your antibiotic replacement. The vitamin E is just supporting the immune system, keeping it up at a high level, so the birds can fight it off naturally. I talked about the copper sulfate, having a small baggie, like 4 to 6 or 8 ounces of copper sulfate, sealed away, protected. What am I missing, Alyssa?
That's probiotics would be good to have on hand.
Yeah, some dry probiotics that you can add to the water would be helpful.
Yeah, that's what I
usually, yeah. I mean, usually we can fix just about everything with, those items. I mean, or if we get ahead of it,
And she mentioned
yeah, it works great.
the pepper with cayenne.
All right. Jeff and Alyssa, I just emailed you what they sent me with the, what was it again? I keep forgetting that name.
Cattle Active, maybe?
Cattle Active, yes, if you want to take. And so
There's some questions on the garlic tincture. So it's vodka, and it's one full bulb, which is 8 to 10 cloves per, 1/5. We call them a fifth down here. I don't know if they're a liter. They're not a liter, but anyway, and just let it soak for 30 days. You can use this for yourself as well. You start getting, some sort of a mild infection, take a shot or two of garlic tincture. It's going to fix something one way or the other. But anyway, SMC also asked about it's vitamin E. E is in Edward, not vitamin D. Vitamin D is fine, but I get a lot more effect out of vitamin E when I'm treating illnesses.
she wanted to know if she should add vitamin D if they are inside on wintertime in Quebec.
They should have vitamin D in their diet. I mean, I keep vitamin D in the diet all the time. So I don't know what vitamin pack she's on, and I mean, if she's on the P&B, she doesn't need any extra. Okay, there's plenty in there. We keep vitamin D levels at higher levels than most people because we understand the need for the vitamin D. But
Yes, so Rebecca was asking if perhaps zeolite is mostly beneficial in the bedding.
I think it's beneficial in both.
Depends on what you're using it for.
Right.
Yes. We find that it works well for ammonia control. If you have humidity in your coop because it's winter and ventilation. Now it's always best to work with ventilation and keep things not compacted. But you never know when the chickens are not gonna, get some water all over the place because they knock the water depending on what you're setting it. So it's good to have it on hand to mitigate that. Does anybody else have another question? We are at an hour and almost and 30 minutes.
I have this ingredient label real quick of the cattle active.
Okay.
I can just read it to everybody. So it's got corn oil, glycerin, onion extract, orange peel extract. Oh, I don't know how to say that word. GUAR, gorgum.
Guar, yeah.
What's that?
Guargum.
Yeah. Soybean oil and vegetable oil. It's a lot of oil. I'm not really sure what the benefits of onion extract and orange peel do, though. So.
Yeah.
Well, the orange peel is going to have D-limonene in it, which is an antimicrobial. It works really good. It also works against internal parasites.
Okay.
But the onion, I mean, it's part of the garlic family, so you're going to get a little bit of that allicin effect from it. But I don't know. There's probably something else.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have another. If you're finished with that, I'll move to another question that relates to what we were talking. What is the best way to ventilate the coop? So we're talking like sometimes here winters with like minus 30, 35 Celsius, minus 40 for like a 15-day stretch. The kind of weather where you open the coop and nobody wants to go out. You didn't want to go out to go to your chores, but you're there anyway.
Yeah.
I know it's cold, but I mean, air quality is really important. The biggest thing to remember is that ammonia and oxygen compete for each other in a living space. So if ammonia is bigger, so it's going to fall down to the ground. So if you don't have good ventilation, then it's all that ammonia is going to fill it's going to fill the air, and it's going to affect your air quality, and it can basically they're not going to be able to breathe as efficiently and as effectively. So it's going to affect their overall health. So if it's between either them not breathing or being a little cold, I would prefer them to be a little cold.
Yes, there is good information about the ammonia in the coop and what it does to chickens in Jeff's video. I think it's the golden rules of raising chickens. It's really well made, and it goes into it very deep. So that's a very good resource if you're dealing with that. And you gave so good advices. Thank you. I think so too. There is not one time that I talk to either Alyssa or Jeff and I don't learn something even after all those years. So I'm enjoying this. How much vodka for one garlic bulb to make the tincture?
We refer to it as a fifth. It's roughly just under. It's 1/5 of a gallon. So, right? Am I doing? Is that right, Alyssa? I don't know.
I'm not much.
Isn't a fifth? A fifth is 500 milliliters. So it'd be a 500 milliliter bottle.
Okay.
And one bulb per 500 milliliter bottle. And you don't have to buy the expensive vodka unless you're going to drink it yourself. So the cheap stuff works just as well as the expensive stuff.
Okay, and then so Barry was saying it works great digging cow's guts working and on ulcers on horses. So that's for the cow active, I guess.
I wonder, was that oreganum in that on that label, Alyssa?
It's it was no, I mean maybe, but it said GUAM. I don't know if the glycerin is helpful at all. So the corn oil.
I just wonder if it has oregano in it, and they're just calling it oreganum, and because that oregano would be a wonderful thing. So
what was it? Was it GUAM? I just closed out of it. I pulled up real quick. Bear with me.
yeah, I don't wonder if it's just a typo. I wonder if it's just another way of saying.
No, so gorgum is a polysaccharide from gore beans. It's used for thickening and stabilizing.
Don't know. That's a new one on me.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing, Barry.
Okay, so Barry, you said you came in late. Where can a guy see the video? If you're referring to this live stream, it will be available on our Facebook page, Tigarikers page. As soon as we're done here, I think Facebook automatically records it and puts it on. If you're referring to the golden rule of raising chickens, that's on Fertrell's YouTube channel.
Yep.
And that should answer your question. Will we be able to listen again to the live? It should go on Facebook automatically once we will end the broadcast here. I hope it does.
Me too.
Yeah, this was a lot of very interesting questions. I really enjoyed it. So is there still some questions? Because if not, we might think of wrapping up. It's 9:30 for you guys in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you're past my bedtime.
Oh, I'm very sorry. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not sorry because there's one. I tried it on a roux who was dopey and he perked up right away.
That's good.
Yes. Something that I do with our chickens, I make my own kefir, milk kefir with kefir grains.
Oh, right. Okay.
For anybody who makes kefir, you know that the grains are going to grow and reproduce, and so you get more and more. But for your own consumption, you can only use so many. So when I have too many, I just put them in a container and then we take them to the chickens, and they just eat it like candy. So that's probiotics on steroids because it's more, it's really live, and they just love it.
Do the grains go bad?
No, what do you mean going bad?
Like if they've been in the refrigerator for over a year?
You probably would want to refresh them. So you'd pull them out of there. I tried reviving grains that had been in the fridge for a year without being fed, and it took some time, but it worked.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to use raw milk for that. Not at first. You would want to use pasteurized milk so that they don't have to compete with that makes sense. With the bacteria that you have in. Yes. Goodbye, Beverly. Thank you for coming. I really appreciated you coming and you inviting all those people to our meeting. And Danalee says that 1/5 of a gallon is 757 mils, according to her phone. So that answers how much vodka you need to 1 bottle of garlic.
Yeah, so it'd be a 750 milliliter bottle.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
So 3/4 of a liter.
Right.
And for the grains, you would revive them. You'll have to watch. Maybe they're gone. First of all, go look because they might have all dissolved if they didn't have feed. But our chickens, they just eat it like candy. They just love it. They just fight over it. I have to actually build it up and make sure I have enough before I give it to them so that they all get some. Yes, there is one chicken. Actually, it's the one that I use for the advertising here for this webinar. Her name is Chives. My kids named her like that, and she's the smallest out there, but she just has this attitude, and so she she always gets in there and gets what she wants. If you give her dandelions and all that, she's the first one out there, and she just gets what she needs, I guess, before
Yep.
everybody else. But
She's in charge.
yes, and I do that regularly. They have apple cider vinegar in the water to kind of keep good, good bacteria there. But it works well. Yes, thank you, Barry. Thank you for coming, for your questions, your comments. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So if nobody else has a question, I think we're just gonna wrap it up. When the live session gets to be posted on Facebook, I will put in the comments or the link. Okay, Rebecca has a question. Apple cider vinegar, does it cause acidosis?
I don't think so.
If it's overused, I mean, you'd have to really use a lot of it to cause acidosis.
Like
But-
it being the only drinking source kind of overdo it.
Yeah. If you're using it at 1 to 2 ounces per gallon, it's a non-issue. I mean, you're not going to cause, and we don't know what your starting pH of your water is, but I've never had an acidosis issue with apple cider vinegar. It's great stuff.